The Galactic High Council chamber was a masterpiece of design, an enormous circular hall suspended above the core of the capital planet, Velura Prime. The walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescent energy, and an artificial sky projected the distant stars of the galaxy's center. Here, the most powerful beings in the known universe gathered to dictate the fate of entire civilizations. Today, they faced their greatest problem yet: humans. High Chancellor Varric of the Drask Imperium sat at the head of the council, his 6 eyes flickering with barely concealed frustration. His chitinous fingers tapped against the polished obsidian table. Surrounding him were representatives of over 50 major species, each one burdened with the same unspoken fear. Across the table, Ambassador Relthos of the Zellery Collective spoke first, his telepathic voice slithering into the minds of those present. "The human expansion must be addressed," he said, his glowing tendrils shifting in agitation. "They are spreading too quickly. 3 new colonies in the last cycle alone. This rate is unprecedented." Varric let out a low, clicking sigh. Unprecedented, yes, but not illegal. The Council does not dictate the expansion of sovereign species. Ambassador Taval of the Otari Dominion, a towering, feline-like being, let out a growl. "You should dictate it. Humans do not expand like other species. They take, they adapt. They thrive where others wither." Varric's mandibles twitched. "That is hardly a crime." "Perhaps not," Relthos admitted. "But we all know where this leads." The chamber fell into a heavy silence. They knew. The Council had existed for thousands of years. They had seen countless species rise and fall, new empires forging their legacies before crumbling under their own weight. But humans were different. They weren't the strongest. They weren't the smartest. They weren't even the most advanced. But they survived. Every time the Council had expected humanity to collapse under pressure, they had risen stronger. They had outlasted the Grail Dominion, outmaneuvered the Delpan Empire, and even forced the war-hardened Tovak Conclave into a reluctant peace. Now, with over 100 colony worlds and one of the fastest-growing militaries in the galaxy, humanity was no longer a mere nuisance. They were a threat. Varric exhaled, his patience wearing thin. "Let us be clear, are you suggesting war against the humans?" The word hung in the air like a death sentence. No one spoke. No one wanted to be the first to say it, until finally a deep voice rumbled through the chamber. Yes. All eyes turned to the source. General Zakor of the Krell Dominion, a monstrous armored behemoth, leaned forward, his plated fists resting on the table. His crimson eyes gleamed with cold calculation. "The longer we wait, the worse it will be," Zakor stated. "If we strike now, we can crush their expansion before they become truly unstoppable." Murmurs of unease spread through the room. Some nodded in agreement, others recoiled at the thought. Varric, however, remained unmoved. "And what of history, General?" he asked. "Have you forgotten what happened to the Grail when they attempted this?" Zakor's mandibles flared. The Grail were fools. They underestimated humanity. They fought an occupation war, trying to enslave them. We would not make that mistake. Ambassador Taval leaned in. "Then what are you suggesting?" Zakor's voice darkened. Annihilation. Silence. Not even the ambient hum of the chamber could soften the weight of the word. Varric narrowed his 6 eyes. "You would commit genocide?" Zakor did not flinch. "Before they committed against us." The chamber erupted into chaos. Some roared in protest, others in support. Threats were exchanged. The council was splintering. Varric slammed his fist against the table, sending a reverberating shockwave through the chamber. Enough. The room fell into reluctant silence. He turned to Zakor. "This council does not act on fear alone. If you want war, you will need more than paranoia. You will need proof." Zakor's eyes gleamed. "Then let me provide it." Varric studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "You have 1 cycle." Zakor smiled. "That will be enough." and with that, the first step toward war was set in motion. The Galactic Council, long hesitant to confront humanity, is now teetering on the edge of declaring all-out war. General Zakor, a ruthless Krell warlord, is given one cycle to justify the extermination of humans. If he succeeds, humanity may face annihilation. General Zakor stood aboard the bridge of his warship, the Blood Oath, staring at the vastness of space through the reinforced viewport. His massive, armored form remained still, but his mind was ablaze with ruthless calculation. The Krell Dominion had always been a warrior species. Conquest and bloodshed were in their bones, but even they had learned to fear humanity, not for their strength, but for their resilience. Zakor intended to change that. He had one cycle to prove to the Council that humanity was a threat, one cycle to justify their annihilation, and he knew exactly where to start. "Commander Thrask," he growled. A smaller Krell officer snapped to attention. "Yes, General. Send the fleet to the Grathis system, immediately." Thrask hesitated. "Grathis? But that is neutral space." Zakor's crimson eyes burned into him. "Not anymore." Thrask bowed his head and relayed the order. Zakor's mandibles curled into a grin. Time to draw out the humans. 3 days later, Grathis, the colony burned. The Krell had descended like a storm, their warships blotting out the sky, their ground forces striking with brutal efficiency. The settlement had barely put up a fight. Human civilians were no warriors. But that wasn't the point. Zakor stood amidst the rubble, towering over the lifeless bodies strewn across the settlement. His heavy boots crushed smoldering debris beneath them as he surveyed the wreckage. He turned to his second-in-command. "How many survivors?" Commander Thrask hesitated. "Roughly 3,000, mostly non-combatants." Zakor nodded. "Good. Leave them alive." Thrask blinked. "Sir?" Zakor's mandibles twitched in amusement. "We want humanity to respond, do we not? Let them see what we have done. Let them rage." Thrask hesitated, but then nodded. "As you command." Zakor looked up at the smoke-stained sky. By now, the distress signal had reached human space. They would come, and when they did, he would be waiting. 5 days later, the human response. Captain Elias Carter of the Terran Defense Fleet stood rigid aboard the warship Valor's Wrath, his hands balled into fists. His crew watched him nervously, waiting for his reaction. On the main holodisplay, the images of Grathis 4 played on a loop. Burned-out buildings, charred bodies, mass graves. A Krell massacre. Carter's jaw tightened. "Survivors?" The officer at the console swallowed. 3,000. They're being held in a detention zone. Carter exhaled slowly, his rage simmering beneath the surface. "And the Krell? They've fortified the planet, no evacuation, no retreat." Carter's eyes narrowed. "They want us to attack." His second-in-command, Lieutenant Vasquez, nodded grimly. "It's a trap." Carter's lips curled. "Good." He turned to his crew. "I want the fleet ready to launch in 6 hours. We're taking back Grathis." Vasquez hesitated. "Sir, this could lead to war." Carter met her gaze, his voice ice-cold. "They made it war the moment they butchered civilians." 12 hours later, Vasquez stood on the war-torn battlefield, watching as the sky burned with the arrival of human warships. Right on schedule. Human drop pods rained from the heavens like vengeful comets, striking the surface with deafening impact. The moment the first hatch opened, the ground erupted in gunfire. Terran Marines poured out, their armor gleaming under the fires of war. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds filled the air as they tore into Krell forces, fighting with an intensity that only humans could muster. Zakor bared his fangs in a battle-hungry grin. Finally, with a roar, he charged into the fray. The battle raged for hours. The Krell were physically superior, stronger, more heavily armored, but the humans fought with precision, adaptability, and sheer unrelenting will. For every Marine that fell, 2 more took their place. For For every Krell victory, humanity refused to break. Zecor cut down soldier after soldier, his crimson blade slashing through human defenses. But still, they pressed forward. They should have fallen by now. Yet they didn't. They fought harder, they fought smarter, and then it happened. From the war-torn ruins, a single human figure emerged. Not a soldier, not a warrior, a child. She couldn't have been more than 10 human years old. Tears streaked her dust-covered face, her small frame trembling. She clutched something in her hands, a pistol, a standard-issue Terran sidearm far too large for her. Zecor loomed over her, his massive frame casting a shadow as he raised his blade. The child didn't run. She didn't cry. She simply raised the gun and fired. The shot went wide, grazing Zecor's shoulder armor. It didn't hurt him. But something about it, about her, made him pause. For the first time in his long, war-forward life, he hesitated. And in that moment the trap was sprung. The ground beneath him exploded. A buried charge, set by retreating Marines, detonated with brutal force. Zecor was flung backward, crashing into the rubble. His vision swam. His armor was scorched. He looked up, dazed. The little girl still stood there, gun in hand, unmoving, fearless. A human. Zecor struggled to his feet, his mind racing. Humans did not fight like other species. They didn't surrender. They didn't break. Even their children refused to yield. His blood ran cold. We cannot win this war. Zecor's plan to bait humanity into war succeeds. But during the battle, he realizes the truth. Humanity is far more dangerous than he anticipated. Even their children refuse to submit, and now it may be too late to stop what he has begun. Zecor sat in the med bay of the Blood Oath, his massive form hunched over, his mind clouded with something he had not felt in years. Now, the wounds from Grathis' 4 would heal. His armor had absorbed most of the explosion's force. But what had shaken him wasn't the battle itself. It wasn't the losses his forces had suffered. It was her, the human child, little girl who had faced him with more defiance than some warlords he had killed. A child who had refused to break. The doors hissed open, and Commander Thrask stepped inside. He stood at attention, his mandibles twitching nervously. "General, the war declaration has been signed." Zecor's crimson eyes flicked up. "By whom?" Thrask hesitated. "By the Council. After the battle, the humans formally accused the Krell of war crimes. In response, the Council has voted. Humanity is now officially designated a galactic threat." Zecor exhaled slowly. So it had happened. The moment he had planned for, the justification he had demanded. But now, it felt wrong. We cannot win this war. He had seen it on Grathis 4. The humans didn't fight like others. They didn't retreat when logic dictated they should. They didn't surrender when all seemed lost. And they sure as hell didn't fear death. But it was too late now. The vote had been cast. The war was inevitable. Zecor clenched his fists. If they were going to war with humans, they would need an entirely new strategy. Because if they fought this war the way the Grail or Delpan had, they would be the next empire to fall. 3 days later, Council War Summit. The Galactic High Council convened in emergency session. The war declaration against humanity had thrown the galaxy into chaos, and the council chamber buzzed with heated discussion. At the center, Varric of the Drask Imperium sat with his 6 eyes scanning the room. Tension ran thick as various species debated the next move. Ambassador Taval of the Othari Dominion stood. "We must strike immediately. Humans spread like a virus. If we hesitate, they will dig in." Ambassador Relthos of the Zelari Collective countered, his glowing tendrils shifting in unease. "You underestimate them. The battle on Grathis 4 has already shown that they are unlike any species we have faced. We must be cautious." General Zecor rose to his feet, his massive form demanding silence. "We must be prepared," he said, his voice heavy. "Humans are not invincible, but if we do not fight this war properly, they will crush us." The room quieted. Varric's mandibles twitched. "And what do you propose?" Zecor stepped forward, his crimson eyes hard as steel. "We do not fight this war like we have fought others," he said. "We do not conquer. We do not occupy. We eliminate." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Zecor continued, his voice cold and unwavering. "The Grail failed because they tried to rule humans. The Delpen failed because they believed humans could be controlled." He exhaled. "We must erase them before they erase us." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some cheered, some shouted in outrage, but the seed had been planted, and the war had truly begun. Meanwhile, Earth, Terran High Command. Captain Elias Carter stood in the war room of Terran High Command, watching as tactical displays lit up the room. Fleet movements, Krell incursions, a rapidly escalating conflict. He turned to General Sloan, the grizzled commander of Terran forces. "How bad is it?" Sloan exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Bad. The Council has labeled us a galactic threat. We're alone." Carter's jaw clenched. "And the Krell? They're moving. Fast. Intelligence suggests they're mobilizing for a full-scale invasion." Carter crossed his arms. "Let them come." Sloan gave him a sharp look. "You don't seem worried." Carter's expression was like stone. "They think they're fighting an enemy like the Grail or the Delpan." A ghost of a smirk touched his lips. "They may have no idea what's coming." The Galactic Council officially declares war on humanity. General Zecor realizes the gravity of the situation, but is trapped in his own war machine. Meanwhile, Captain Carter is already planning humanity's counterstrike. The Krell invasion force tore through space, their warships blotting out the stars as they advanced toward the human colonies. It had taken only 5 days for the Council's war machine to mobilize, and now, the first phase of their extermination campaign was beginning. Zecor stood on the bridge of the Blood Oath, staring at the looming planet before them, Nova Helios, one of humanity's largest outer colonies. It would fall within hours. But even as his forces prepared for planetary bombardment, something gnawed at his mind. It's too quiet. Humanity had known this war was coming, so where were their defenses? Where was their fleet? "General," Commander Thrask called out, "scanners detect no major military presence on the surface. The colony's security force is minimal." Zecor frowned. "No resistance?" Thrask hesitated. "None. But there's something else. A series of distress beacons have been activated across their other colonies. It's like they want us to know where they are." Zekor's blood ran cold. This wasn't an invasion. This was a trap. His mandibles clicked. "Recall our ground forces." "Now," Thrask blinked. "But sir, we haven't even..." Before he could finish, alarms blared across the ship. A fleet had just entered the system. A human fleet. And they weren't running. They were hunting. The first counterattack above Nova Helios. The Valor's Wrath led the charge, its sleek gray hull cutting through the darkness of space like a knife. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge, watching as the Krell fleet scrambled to react. They had been expecting an easy slaughter. Instead, they were about to learn what it meant to fight humans. "All ships, engage," Carter ordered. The void ignited, with weapons fire. Human railguns, faster and more precise than anything the Council had anticipated, shredded through Krell shields. Tactical nukes detonated in controlled bursts, turning enemy capital ships into burning husks. The Krell fleet had numbers. Humanity had adaptation. They didn't fight fair, they fought to win. The Krell scrambled to retaliate, but the battle was already slipping from their grasp. Carter smirked. "Welcome to the real war. The Krell's worst nightmare." Zecor staggered as the Blood Oath shuddered under a direct hit. The humans had disabled 3 Krell warships in under 5 minutes. "Impossible." "Sir," Thrask shouted, "the humans, they're boarding us." Zekor's mandibles flared. "What?" No species in the galaxy boarded enemy warships mid-battle. It was suicide. But humans were different. Zecor barely had time to process the madness of it before the ship's lights flickered. The sound of explosions and gunfire echoed through the corridors. The humans had arrived, and they weren't here to take prisoners. The human offensive, inside the Blood Oath. The first Krell warrior barely had time to react before a railgun round punched through his skull. Lieutenant Vasquez led the charge, her squad moving with terrifying efficiency. Unlike the Krell, who relied on brute force, human soldiers fought with precision, hitting weak points using cover, outmaneuvering their slower, heavier foes. They weren't winning the battle. They were butchering the Krell. Vasquez activated her comm. "Captain, we have breached their command deck, moving to secure." Through the smoke and carnage, she spotted him. Zakor, the general, stood at the far end of the bridge, crimson blade in hand. His armor was scarred, his crimson eyes filled with something Vasquez had never seen from a Krell before. Fear. She raised her rifle. "Stand down." Zakor bared his fangs. "Never." He lunged. She fired. The Krell invasion turns into a catastrophe as humanity ambushes them, launching a brutal counterattack. Zakor, once the hunter, is now the prey. His flagship overrun by human forces. Zakor had fought wars for over 2 centuries. He had led countless invasions, crushed rebellions, and butchered entire species without hesitation. But never, not once, had he felt like this. Cornered, outmatched, hunted. The human soldiers moved like wraiths through the corridors of the Blood Oath, their weapons cutting down Krell warriors with terrifying efficiency. Zakor had seen battles turn before, but never this fast, never this brutally. The humans weren't fighting for conquest, they were fighting for eradication. He barely had time to block as Vasquez fired again. His energy blade intercepted the shot, deflecting it with a shower of sparks. He snarled, lunging forward. Humans were fast, but he was still stronger. She sidestepped, fluid as water, then planted a plasma knife straight into his side. Zakor let out a roar of pain, staggering back. His crimson blood dripped onto the steel floor. His vision blurred. This can't be happening. His people were losing, and the humans were only getting started. The turning point, the Bridge of Valor's wrath. Captain Elias Carter watched from the command deck as the battle unfolded. Krell warships, once feared across the galaxy, were now drifting wrecks. The enemy's formation had collapsed. Their ground forces had been slaughtered. Their flagship was on the brink of destruction. It was over. Vasquez's voice crackled through his comm. "Sir, we have secured the Blood Oath. Zakor is wounded, but alive." Carter's smirk faded. "Alive? That wouldn't do." "Finish him," he said simply. A pause. "Sir?" Carter's ice-cold gaze never wavered. "We don't take prisoners." A silence stretched over the comm. Then Vasquez sighed. A gunshot echoed through the feed. Carter exhaled. Good work. The Krell had thought they were the superior predators. But now they understood the truth. They weren't the hunters. They were the prey. And humanity was just getting started. Epilogue. The new reality. The fall of the Blood Oath sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Krell Dominion, once a powerhouse of military strength, was shattered. The Council, seeing the devastation, scrambled for peace talks. But humanity wasn't interested in peace. They had learned their lesson. For too long, the galaxy had feared humans, had plotted against them. Now, it was their turn to decide who would survive. And for the first time in history, the real war had begun. Zakor is defeated and executed, the Krell Dominion collapses, and humanity takes control of the war. The Galactic Council now realizes they've unleashed something far worse than they ever feared. Humanity is no longer defending itself. They are taking over.